Hi everyone. So in this video, what we are going to tackle is a new, core aspect of our application. So after building out, some little domain model here, and also, working with the test a lot, creating a deployment and so on. So I think now we are at a point where we can, tackle some a little bit other stuff. And so I have created here one issue which is called support multiple rental businesses on the platform by Rent Your Stuff Limited. So as Rent Your Stuff Limited, we want to offer Rent Your Stuff application to multiple rental businesses so that we or I can offer to a lower price or whatever. So the point is that we would like to make our application not only usable for one rental business, but actually for multiples. So this means it's all about multi-tenancy. This is a concept that is quite well known in the software industry, and on how to achieve that, there are a lot of ways to do it. So one way would be to just deploy multiple Heroku applications with dedicated databases, and then just for each customer you would create a dedicated instance of your software. And then there's another one, to basically, have it all in one running application and in one database, but just having a separation, by a particular column in your database, and then only show the data that you would like to display for the current user that is, associated to a particular tenant. So what we will do now in this issue, I'm not sure how long this will actually take. Perhaps it's like multiple videos or something. But generally, I think we can, follow along this idea of this multi-tenancy application. And luckily there is already a plugin out there or like an add-on out there for Jmix, which actually does the multi-tenancy within your application. If you want to run in this setting, having one big application and just separating by columns, basically, or by values in a tenant column. So this is what this add-on is all about, and I think for us this is just fine. So I think the first step would be that we actually enable this multi-tenancy within our application. And then there are a couple of other to-dos that we have to fulfill in order to make our application really tenant aware. So let's take a look into this. So the first thing to note here is that there's a documentation on Jmix, on the Jmix documentation site about the multi-tenancy add-on. And this basically goes through all the parts that are necessary in order to achieve that. I think we probably can follow along quite well what they have written here. So let's perhaps just take a look. I already created a branch here, or not a branch right now, but actually just your database. So let's get rid of the running application, and instead just create a corresponding branch. And so the first thing is that we can here via this Jmix menu and then add-ons, we can go and search for a particular add-on. And the one that we would like to have is this multi-tenancy thing. So this is just open source, exactly how the Jmix core and stuff. So there's no special needs for it. We can just go ahead and install it. And so if we have went through this wizard, basically the only thing that happens here is if we go to our build Gradle, then we will probably find exactly here those information about the multi-tenancy add-on. And I think we can actually also put that here just to have it the same. Okay, so Gradle currently is downloading all the required stuff. So yeah, we just wait a little bit. And after these dependencies have been added, so the thing that we have to do, let's go back to the documentation here, and let us guide through the information. So here they are talking about the concept in general and how to install it, and so on and so forth. So I think the practical thing that we have to do is to basically here, I think here it starts where we would need to do something on our own. So the first thing is that we have to, our user entity, if we go there, which is, has been generated initially at the beginning of the, sorry, the index is not built yet. Okay, so now we got it. Has been generated when we created the project. And what we have to do here is to create a particular, particular field, which we will call tenant. And basically we can just, copy over this exact information here. And the important thing is that we need to annotate a particular column with this tenant ID annotation. So let me just pull that here down. And then additionally, what we have to do is to implement this interface accepts tenant, which is just a marker, or not a marker interface, but it just has this one method, get tenant ID. So this, with this getter, we already almost already implement. Right now we have this column called tenant, so this means our get tenant is actually not matching the requested method name here. So let's just go ahead and implement that here, and then we can just directly return this value and put that here. We could have also renamed our attribute and directly called it tenant ID, but let's just go with that as of now. So once this is done, what we can do is to add this tenant information, or this column that we basically just generated, to the user browser in order to see, for each user which tenant it belongs to. And then additionally, we can do the very same thing here for this user edit screen. So if we go here to user edit XML, and then, for example, at the very beginning, we can create a tenant field. The property is tenant, and it shouldn't be editable by default. Okay, so there's a particular logic that they want us to implement here, which is, basically, having some reasonable behavior in place for this tenant selection and so on. So so first of all, let's go here and inject our additional dependencies. So first of all, we have those two beans from this tenant add-on, which is called this tenant provider, which just gives you the current tenant ID of the current user. And then the second part would be this multi-tenancy UI support. So this is a bean which just has some basically API in place in order to put that into our running, or our extension of our user editor, and also in the login field. So I think there we also need that. Okay, so the first thing here is that what we can do is there's a thing called on before show. So directly before the screen loads, and let's see. Okay, so there is no method right now in place already, so we can just copy that in. So the logic here is, that we just get from the current user that is actually using this user editor. We will just check on the tenant ID, and if so either there is no value in the tenant field, or if there is a tenant set then it will basically disable the changing the mechanism of this tenant field and set the value to the current tenant ID. So this means that you cannot just create users for other tenants, for example, right? So this would be this condition here. Okay, and then we have a subscription on the tenant field, which we can also take a look at. So this means when in this tenant field there is a change, then currently the logic is that it sets this the value of the username and then basically prefixes it with this particular tenant ID. We can actually take a look into that in a second when we run this application. And then after that, there's another one which is on init. So this means the initial part of the screen lifecycle. And what we want there is that we fill our tenant field with just the tenant options. So it's basically just a list of all the tenants that are in the database that are managed through this tenant management UI. And okay, so the last one that we actually have to do here in order to make that work is that we basically enable, so this is for new entities, so there's already a method on init entity, so this happens when there's a new user is created, and then what we'll want to do is to make this tenant field editable, versus before, if we look at this one here, it's by default, it's disabled. So with that, I think probably we can even try to run the application and just see if this logic is now properly in place. So if we now click the play button, then you will see that this add-on comes with Liquibase scripts itself. So this means that where all the tenant information, I'm not sure if we can yeah, we can probably take a look at it later, but it just contains the information about the tenants and so on. So we will just go ahead and execute that. And then additionally, what comes up now is that we want to add our user with a particular new attribute called tenant. I will cancel that here now and hope that it's actually, yeah, so it doesn't do anything. Okay, so this is good because I just want to basically go ahead and rename the Liquibase script accordingly. So let's see if this is already there. Okay, so it's not. So this means that I will then go ahead here and generate the Liquibase change logs, but do not actually immediately start the application. So let's go here and then say make user tenant aware. Okay, and with that now we can actually start our application and run and take a look on what has now changed. So meanwhile, perhaps we can already go through the next phase. So this is all about the actual user management UI, where we now introduce a particular additional logic, which allows us to interact with this tenant behavior. And then the next thing that we have to do here is in the login screen, there's an option. So currently this multi-tenancy add-on, I think there's an option you can either, so the username will either change to this tenant ID and then this symbol here and then the actual username, or an alternative would be that in the URL we can actually already specify the tenant ID, and then if we just enter the name, then it will automatically be prefixed. And for this, at the bottom we see here this logic that comes here into place. So this means when the login method is in this login screen is invoked, then we will actually yeah, take a look at the URL routing in order to get the URL parameter. And if this is actually present, then the actual username will get prefixed, and then we'll try to do the regular authentication. Okay, so now I think our application should have started, and we can still log in as admin because admin does not have any kind of tenant association. And so what you now see here is that we have this user tenant. So let's actually go there and add a message to the entity attribute. So let's take a look once again. So now we have this tenant association, and if we here now say create, then you can see we have a selection of tenants. Right now there's nothing in it, and this is because we did not configure anything. So under administration tenants, you can now go ahead and say I would like to have a tenant ID. So this would be then T1, and the tenant would be whatever, tenant 1, or like the name, and then we can have a 2. So this then represent basically our organizations that would like to use other platform that we offer as this Rent Your Stuff application. So this means when I now create once again, then it should be able to select one of those. Okay, so this is now actually happening. So yeah, then the next logic is here. When you select one, then it will actually prefix this username. So yeah, this is just a matter of taste basically on how we want to do that. For now, we can just leave it like this, and I will just go ahead and create a user for that. Yeah, and I think this should be already it. And now we see we have a tenant 1 association just because we selected this accordingly. So let's go ahead and create another user for the second tenant. And yeah, so now we have basically two users that correspond to different tenants. So what does that now mean? Besides that logic that we have now, possibility to differentiate our users. So in order to make okay, so perhaps let's first go here and just do what they ask us here to do, to go into this login screen and then do so. Let me just copy this over. Okay, so this is already good. And then the basically the only part is that we have to look up this login method. So this happens here, and at the very beginning we just take the username from the username field, and then the additional step that now happens is that we say we pass in this username into this multi-tenancy UI support, and we pass in the reference to the URL routing, and then we get back the username that has potentially be prefixed if the URL contained this tenant ID identifier or this parameter. And then afterwards, yeah, we basically just change this username, and then the logic will continue to go on with this username. Okay, so I think with that we can just restart the application and take a look if now, when we now log in, if this is at all possible, let's say. Okay, so as admin we can still log in, so this is all just fine. So there's one thing that I should probably do. I'm not sure. Otherwise it most likely will not work. So right now those users both have not any kind of a role, and in particular we don't have the role to minimal access. So I think right now what we could do is to give them full access in order to be able to log in. And then at some point, later we will just create a dedicated role in order to make this a little bit more realistic scenario. So this means that I could now say T1, and then it would be Mario. And with that, I should be able to log in. Okay, so this is already good. And if we go for T2 Mario, then this should the same way be possible. So this means now what we have to do as the next step is to basically make our, so I think with that we actually have done this and we have done that. So this means that actually we also did this the last thing here. So this means the last thing that we have to do here is to make our business entities tenant aware. So right now, our business entities, product, customer, and so on, they don't have any association to a tenant at all. So this means they just don't have a column, and the data, like the tenant ID, is not actually automatically inserted into our, when I, as a tenant one user, create a customer or something, then it's not actually added to this customer object. So this is, I think, the last step that we have to do in order to get this going. And this is probably also described here. Not the configuring users, but let's take a look. Yeah, okay, so here it's a little bit described. So we have to have an attribute of type string with the tenant ID annotation, and then this will make all of our business entities tenant aware. And so this means that all the logic in our source code, like for example, if we go back to our product browse or something, where we fetch all the products, at some point at the data loading, somewhere at the right before the database, the JPA, or actually the Jmix multi-tenancy add-on will actually add a particular where statement to this to the SQL statement here, or to this JPQL statement, to basically fetch only the data where the tenant ID matches the current tenant ID of the user. So this means it's really transparent for us here. We don't need to do that or to code anything at all. So the only thing that we have to do is to go to our, for example, product, and then add this particular entity attribute to our entity. So since we have our standard entity in place, I think we can even just put it in here, and with that just completely have it transparent to the applications, to the business entity, sorry. So let's go ahead here and say this will be a tenant, and it should be of data type string. And yeah, for now I will not make it mandatory, because most likely there might be a chance that we have data in our database. So right now not, but I'm not sure about our deployed database. So for now I would say we can just make it not mandatory, and then at some later point migrate the data, and then actually with that then we can also switch the mandatory thing on. So then we have to do this tenant ID here. And so when we now generate our Liquibase changelogs once again, then we should have for all of our entities now this tenant attribute, because we added it to the standard entity. Okay, so I think we can store that as well, and then rename it. Okay, so now we have basically introduced that. So let's run our application and create this corresponding or yeah, just do the database migration, and then we can actually take a look on how the resulting application looks, and what this means for our usage here. So if we log in as admin, then we still, let's go to products. There's no product in it right now, customer as well, so there's no data in it. Okay, so this means that if we now log in as T1 Mario, and right now we don't see anything, so this would be our, yeah, and then we can just create a new customer, for example. Yeah, so this would be T1 customer street, and we could also say here T1 product, and we would just don't do anything at all, and this would be the T1 category, and we can even associate this product to this category. So and now let's go ahead and take a look and log in as this T2 user, and take a look on what we see here. So as you can see, there is no data for the customers. There's no product data and no customer, no products categories. So this means we have achieved this differentiation of the data. So this means I could, T2 Okay, so this, this should just work as is, and if I now go back to T1 user, then I should still only be able to see the data from the T1 user. And this happens now all without, any kind of changing of our source code. It's just, at the very direct before the database, it actually, will introduce this tenant concept and will, at the corresponding fields. To when inserting data or when loading data, it will fetch for the particular one. So, and this means that we, if we go here and take a look at our database, let me just copy this over and so now I should be able to take a look at at our example database here that we generated. Perhaps I can rename that connection. And so let's then probably take a look at the customer table. And as you see here, let's find the tenants, or the tenant column actually. So here you see the identifier of this tenant is just stored. And with that, it basically does this separation. The same goes for all other data, like, that we configured. And so this means that, now we have basically put it to a standard entity, but theoretically there would also be the option to, make particular entities not tenant aware. So this means that, for example, it would be possible to have some, common data. Let's just say, for example, if we, so we have this one enum, which we use, which is the price unit, I think. And potentially this would be, imagine if we would have that as a database table to make it more dynamic or to make it more configurable, then potentially we wouldn't want that, every tenant has to enter this, but instead we would like to configure that globally. And for these kinds of scenarios, this would be possible to not, not have an entity that, basically is not tenant aware. And so because of that, and I'm not sure on where this is actually going, perhaps what we can do is to say we make that not, put this tenant information into this, not into the standard entity, but actually have like a standard tenant entity. Yeah, I think with that I will, yeah, perhaps right now we don't need to do that as a last step, but yeah, this would be the idea behind it. So I think with that we have now covered all of those requests, and I think in the next video then we will take a look at how it influences the tests, or if it influences the tests at all. Thank you very much for watching, and then see you next time.